Welcome to BioBytes. Today we have Shehnaaz Suliman joining us. Incredibly excited about this episode. Quick overview on Shinaz, and I've tried to make this as concise as possible, but the list goes on. Shinaz is an experienced board member and CEO, currently at Recode Therapeutics, also a board member at Ultragenics and 10x Genomics. A career that stemmed across some incredible companies such as Electa, Gilead, Genentech, and Theravance, and multiple awards. A couple that I want to bring to light: Forbes 50 over 50 leader 2023, Silicon Valley Business Journal top 100 women of influence leader, and Shinaz also is the chair of Women in Bio boardroom. And again, I think somebody who champions board diversity, and super excited to dive into this. So Shinaz, if you could kindly start us off and share some highlights of your journey in the biotech industry, and what initially drew you into this field, that would be incredible.
Thank you, Shak. So I am a physician drug developer, deal maker, and company builder. I trained in South Africa and have practiced in the developing world and in the developed world context at the NHS, and I have always been interested in making a difference to patients, and I've been interested in making a difference to many patients, so at the macro level. And I was struck during my residency at the height of the AIDS epidemic in South Africa at how innovations in the developed world never quite made it to the developing world, and that access was a huge part of what we needed to solve for. So as a result, after residency, after some time at Oxford, doing development economics in business school, I discovered biotech. I was excited and thrilled at the prospect of being at the forefront of innovation, but I was also excited and thrilled at the prospect of being able to make that innovation available globally, and especially in the developing world. So I joined Gilead when they were still a pure play HIV company to essentially drive access through developing world partnerships with Indian generic companies for our HIV medications, and also help with corporate strategy and help Gilead diversify outside of HIV into new therapeutic areas. The arc of my career has spanned drug development at companies like Genentech and Roche, and then more on the smaller and entrepreneurial side in companies like Electa and Theravance, focusing on transformational deals that have significantly altered the trajectory of a company. I came to Recode about 3 years ago because I was thrilled with the idea of unlocking the potential of genomic medicine and understood the importance of delivery to enabling any genetic cargo to be delivered to any tissue or cell type in the body. And that's why we've been working very hard to drive toward our first 2 lead indications in patients. So hopefully that gives you a sense of sort of the arc of my career. I will say that the Gilead partnerships, of which I'm incredibly proud, enabled us to deliver life-saving HIV medicines to almost 20 million patients across the developing world, and it has had a profound impact on how HIV as a disease is being perceived, and have given countless of people and patients around the world the opportunity to live productive lives as a result.
Such an incredible background, and I will dive into your story more as we go forward. But I think also spending some time in the investment banking world, right, and prior to
Correct.
the biotech industry, and hence why now being a biotech builder, I think almost looking at it from a holistic standpoint while being trained from a medic standpoint, so also understanding what we're building, incredible. And I think when we talk about building biotechs, Shinaz, from ground up as you've come into Recode and prior to that as a president at Elector, what are some of the most successful characteristics and attributes you strive for when building companies out?
I think it's really important to have fundamental curiosity about the science and where it could go, and to create a strategic vision for how to navigate the basic science through translational science into the clinic to make a difference. And once you have a North Star around how this can make a difference and potentially impact patients, then develop the operating plan to support that and the financing plan, and drive like mad to make that happen. So this is a key component. I think one also needs to be super creative in this environment, which is a challenging financing environment, about how that financing gets done and under what circumstances, and have a clear sense of how you can continue to leverage up on milestones and, in fact, build to the next milestone to enable a company to be sustainable long term. So, yes, the curiosity helps. You also have to be extremely pragmatic about, the company build. My other recommendation would be to be extremely prudent with use of cash and how quickly one builds and scales, because the last thing you want to do is downsize. And, in order to do that, it's really critical to hire people that are extremely flexible and can do multiple things, and to focus the company build and operating plan on around, a talent that can enable it to be done, essentially doing more with less.
And I think, throughout this journey and venture you've been on, Shinaz, I mean, it might be hard to knock it down to two, but what would be two of your most favorite bits of advice that you've received on this journey and venture you've been on?
Well, you have to stay true to the science, so I think there's no question about that. But I think one also has to think very clearly about how to translate that science into data milestones that are going to drive value for patients, value for physicians, and value for investors. So again, being super thoughtful about how that can get done is important. I think the other piece is it's still fundamentally about people. So hiring the best possible team to execute a plan, ensuring that people are brought into the mission, as well as having absolutely outstanding skills to be able to deliver, and hiring high potential people who can grow and scale as the company continues to grow and scale, is also really important. So all of this is important, surrounding oneself with the right team. I also want to give a call out to my excellent board, which is filled with entrepreneurs and operators who are extremely smart, sharp, and operationally oriented. They've all built companies from the ground up. They understand what is required. We are aligned about the operating plan, and we have the most incredibly functional conversations in the boardroom about how to do it. And so if you can drive this tight alignment across the company, this is huge and really helps you focus on what matters, which is driving results.
Yeah, and to build on that, the cultural piece is so important, and maybe because I'm a psychology graduate at heart, I'm always so fascinated by cultures that are being built in organizations, right? And how the leaders at the top are almost laying the stage down for how folks follow. And then again, throughout these different companies you worked in, both larger and smaller, Shinaz, how do you go about fostering a culture of innovation and collaboration within your organizations?
Yeah, I mean, it's been said that culture eats strategy, but for breakfast or something like that. But
Yeah.
I think the reality is, in this environment, it's still fundamentally about results and delivering results and delivering on milestones and the promise of, having an innovative therapeutic get to patients. In our case, in genetic medicine, we're really at the start of doing new things like, delivering mRNA to the lung with our lead programs in cystic fibrosis and primary ciliary dyskinesia, for which there are absolutely no treatments. So the cultural aspect of it is huge. Our first value is putting patients first, but you also have to think it, own it, do it, and have a sense of urgency about getting to patients and making the difference and realizing the difference that we hope can be made. The reality is, you can have a strong culture, but if you don't deliver results, you could argue that doesn't really, gel well together. I think, but they're not mutually incompatible. You can have a very hard driving, hard charging, strive for delivering on goals and getting drugs to patients, and at the same time have a supportive environment in which people can thrive. And that's really what we try to strive for here, is ensuring that mastery of what we're trying to do is table stakes, but then ensuring that everybody feels like they can over deliver, because there's no politics, there's no nonsense, there's functional decision making. It's a place where it's a meritocracy. If you do good work, it'll be recognized and rewarded. But I encourage everyone to set high standards for themselves and to, go above and beyond. And that's the kind of culture that helps drive the results that we need in sort of a maybe a challenging market backdrop. So I think these two things very much go hand in hand. I don't think you can do one without the other, but I also don't think that a good culture mitigates against an inability to deliver. And I think an inability to deliver in a functional environment creates the kind of culture which is really inspirational.
I think also when we think about the very best people when you're recruiting them and bringing them into the company, they often want to work with incredibly passionate people that are really good at what they do. And, it's almost like that saying, iron sharpens iron. If you continue to bring the best people on board, they're going to be full steam and all into the mission and being able to deliver. So no, I like it. And as we build on that, as a CEO now at Recode, from your experience with Recode and prior to this, what are some key strategies for building and maintaining strong relationships with key stakeholders such as investors, regulatory bodies, and healthcare providers?
I think having tight alignment on the plan that you're executing is extremely important, and that alignment needs to be shared from the boardroom to, the scientists working in the lab at the cold front and physicians interacting with patients, and in fact, our investors to a certain extent. So this is absolutely the number one thing: is having key alignment around the plan that we're trying to execute and what we're all working towards. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is really about trust. It's about doing what you say you're going to do and delivering on that and being super transparent. If you're unable to accomplish that, we've always had a very transparent culture around what we're trying to do here and why, and that has served us well with every kind of stakeholder. We pride ourselves on having super high integrity around science and the data, and making sure that we don't make promises that we can't deliver on. And if we can't because of situations outside of our control, we're very transparent about that. So I think that's super important. And again, we work hard to try to over deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when I look at your background, Shinaz, I think you're truly a globalized biotech executive, right? Grew up in a whole other side of the world. You've studied in the UK at Oxford. You now live over in the US. If you had to sum up this fascinating journey you've been on, could you sum that up in a few sentences for us?
Well, I think I grew up in South Africa under apartheid and learned many lessons growing up under that kind of environment about how to lead through, how to manage adversity, channel adversity into something that builds resilience, and then to become a substantive leader based on those experiences. And I think that was extremely important because I learned a lot about leadership courage very early on in my formative years, and I learned a lot about what it takes to be able to relate to people who are going through extreme forms of suffering. So I hope that I have tried very hard to use those lessons to be an empathic leader and to be a leader of substance. And whatever issues I take on, whether it's, in the office or outside of the office, is sort of driven by that strong desire. I grew up with a very acute sense of justice and fighting for justice and fighting for the underdog and, having a voice for others that perhaps don't have the voice to stand up for themselves. And, at the end of the day, my narrative about my life has been we fought apartheid and we won. So everything else is contextualized relative to that. I've also had the extreme privilege of being able to be in close proximity to leaders like Nelson Mandela, who is my iconic leader. And I often tell people what you have to do sometimes is channel your inner Mandela, is really think about what what you aspire to be and try to model that, and have that be a part of who you become as a leader. And I've tried to do that. Of course, I'll never be him, but I always think about adversity, leading through adversity, the ability to channel the lessons we learn from adversity in a constructive way, in order to be a more empathic and relatable leader.
Yeah, I love it. And that diversity piece, I can see you're authentic, and often I think as you go through life and you meet leaders, everybody looks for authenticity, and that's great to hear. And last question I want to leave you with, Shehnaaz, incredible things going on at Recode. We were just speaking prior to recording. What are you most excited about at Recode Therapeutics in the upcoming months and kind of year ahead in 2025?
Well, it will always be about making a difference to patients. I hope that's been clear. It's been a consistent theme, and everyone who works here understands that. We've just started dosing patients in our cystic fibrosis and primary ciliary dyskinesia trials. These are patients who have no treatment options available to them with very, very severe diseases. And it would be an absolute privilege for us to impact the trajectory of these patients' life with a treatment option, because right now there are none. So we're extremely excited to see whether we can, get through safety tolerability in patients and ultimately move to proof of concept studies to see a signal. This is what is absolutely key. And I think once you do that, everything else follows. I couldn't be more excited about our trajectory, but I'm also very mindful of the risks. Clinical risks, scientific risks, regulatory risks. This is the first time an inhaled mRNA treatment has been tested in patients. So it's always going to be about balancing the optimism that we feel about the potential our science and drugs can have, giving the therapies every opportunity to succeed, but also being mindful that we're at an early stage of the journey and hoping we see some signals that enable us to continue to drive these therapeutics to patients ultimately.
Amazing. Shehnaaz, thank you so much for joining us here today. Absolutely loved having you on as a guest, and I've no doubt the folks listening in will really enjoy the episode. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.